Hello, everyone. This is Gilgamesh, and welcome to Exploring the Hebrew Bible.
And I'm Boaz. Good to be with you again, Gilgamesh.
And this is Ruth. A pleasure to explore a new topic as always.
Ready for another deep dive. Today we're going way back to the world of ancient texts.
Today we're talking about the Aleppo Codex, written in 920 CE.
Ooh, a codex. Sounds riveting.
Okay, I know. It sounds about as exciting as a dusty old library, right?
Hey, I actually do get to choose the topic, guys. Let's try and pretend to be excited about it.
Yeah.
1,000 years old, this Hebrew Bible has seen it all.
Okay, so get this right. We are diving into, a real-life historical mystery today. We're talking about the Aleppo Codex, which is this super old, almost 1,100-year-old Hebrew Bible.
Wow.
And it's considered the most complete and accurate text that we have. And it even influenced Maimonides' work, which is pretty impressive.
Right.
So just to give everyone, a little bit of background, we're talking about the crown, right?
Yes, Keter Aram Tzova, the Crown of Syria.
This wasn't just any old book. It was
Yeah.
created around 930 CE. And it included, the Hebrew Bible.
It's the definitive edition of the Hebrew Bible.
Certainly it's the oldest, and pretty much all modern editions descend from this in one way or another.
It's true. Even today, every Torah scroll you see can be traced back to this one codex. All right, you've piqued my curiosity. We're talking about a book so important that kings were holding it for ransom.
You got it. Kings, ransoms, the work.
So what made this Aleppo Codex so special?
Well, for starters, this thing is old. Really old. We're talking 10th century.
10th century, that's over 1,000 years ago.
You kind of have to picture it. Before printing presses? Heck, before books as we know them. Scrolls, that was the thing.
Right, you'd unroll this long parchment.
Exactly. And for something like the Hebrew Bible, massive.
Yeah.
But the Aleppo Codex, it's a codex. Bound, like the books we use. That format.
So instead of this huge scroll, you've got a reference book. I can see how that changes things for studying.
Well, yeah, finding your specific location in the text was much easier with a codex than with a scroll. And so this format just kind of took over the world.
Totally. Plus, scribes could add notes right in the text.
And these codices, not for reading at synagogue. Scrolls were still used for that. This was different. Scholarly. They wanted to get every word, every sound perfect and pass it down that way.
Precisely. The scrolls they used in synagogue were much more elaborate and harder to create, but they also contained a lot less information. There was no special markings or anything like that in them. It was just the consonantal text.
It's remarkable, the detail in the Aleppo Codex.
Yeah.
Copying the entire Hebrew Bible back then. Years of work.
Talk about dedication. The guy behind it all, Aaron Ben Asher.
Yeah.
This scribe was so good, he's legendary.
His whole family, really. His own father, Moshe ben Asher, created the Cairo Codex, another vitally important manuscript.
So preserving the text was a family business.
Absolutely. And it shows. The Aleppo Codex, it's considered the oldest, most complete example we have of the Tiberian Masoretic tradition. Basically, these were Jewish scribes. Tiberius is in modern-day Israel. They were known for being ridiculously precise.
So if you wanted the best, most accurate Hebrew Bible, you went to the Tiberian Masoretes. No wonder this codex is a big deal.
And we're just getting started, this codex. It's special. And a little controversial. We'll get into all that as we go deeper.
Okay, so it's old, it's important, meticulously crafted. We've got that. But what's in it? All these secret notes and markings, what are those about?
Well, not so much secret notes as a system. Very specific. It's called Masoretic notation, basically. Tiny symbols, annotations. All over the margins of the Hebrew text. And it wasn't just one person. Generations of scribes added these markings. They tell you how to read it, how to chant it even, how to understand it properly. Take vowels, for example.
Right, we just see those printed now, but...
Exactly, they didn't have that in the original Hebrew. So these marks, they tell you how it's supposed to sound.
Wow, so they weren't just copying the words, they were preserving the music of it, the way it would have sounded way back when.
It's pretty amazing. Art and science. They even had marks for, if a word was unusual or only used a few times, they'd note that. Almost like a built-in concordance. And the Aleppo Codex, top-notch. Its notation, super accurate, really comprehensive. And remember, no printing presses. Each copy, handmade. So to find one this detailed, this consistent, remarkable. Shows the skill of Aaron Ben Asher and those scribes. But get this. Back then, they didn't even write vowels down.
Wait, what? No vowels at all? How did they even read anything?
No kidding. And that's where the Masoretes come in. These were serious scholars who dedicated their lives to making sure the Hebrew Bible was preserved perfectly. They were like the guardians of Scripture.
So these Masoretes, they weren't just scribes then.
They were like the ultimate scholars of their time, meticulously studying and preserving every detail. Think meticulous editors, linguistic detectives.
It was a carefully trained skill and very frequently a family tradition. You were born to do this.
Oh, I can only imagine. These scribes, the Masoretes, they weren't just copying words. They were preserving what they believed to be the very word of God.
It's like, every little pen stroke, every letter had to be perfect.
Exactly. And they developed these incredible systems to ensure that accuracy.
Like what kind of systems? Because we're talking like way before spell check, autocorrect, any of that stuff.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, think about it. They didn't even have computers to track every character. They had to do it all themselves.
Wow.
There's even a story, might be apocryphal, who knows, but that they could pinpoint the exact middle letter of the entire Torah.
Well, and a frequent note that you find is that a specific word only occurs once in the entire text, or sometimes they would note that it only occurs 2 or 3 times. They had to manually figure that out without the aid of computers. That's quite a task.
So how did they even, I don't know, how do you even start to do something like that?
And it wasn't just to ensure they were copying it correctly, but that it would be read and understood correctly centuries later. They created these intricate systems of vowel markings, musical notations to guide the chanting. There are even places where they delve into detailed grammatical analysis, all written by hand in the margins. But in this case, those notes, they weren't just opinions or interpretations. They were the result of generations of scholarship, ensuring that all the nuances of the language, the music of the text, would be passed down.
It makes you wonder, though, if they were so careful, did they ever, disagree?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Uh-huh.
Even with all the rules, there were different schools of thought, even within the Tiberian tradition. And this leads us to, well, a pretty important guy, Moses Maimonides.
Wait, Maimonides, the Mishnah Torah Maimonides, what's he got to do with the Aleppo Codex?
So it's the 12th century now. Maimonides, he's working on standardizing the Torah scrolls, specifically how they're divided into sections for public reading,
Synagogues had developed a system where you could read through the Torah through the course of a year, starting over again on the holiday of Simchat Torah.
So before that, everyone was just, winging it?
Not exactly, but there wasn't a universal system.
Yeah.
He wanted to make it consistent, and for that he needed a model, a master copy, the best one. And some scholars think that copy was the Aleppo Codex.
So this one book, Aaron Ben Asher's work, it might have changed how we still read the Torah today.
It's a huge possibility, but not everyone agrees. And that brings us to, well, the printing press kind of changes everything because the Aleppo Codex is one of a kind.
Mm-hmm.
But most people today, they read printed Bibles.
Right. So how do we get from this amazing handwritten book to, mass production?
So 1525, this printer, Jacob Ben Haim, he prints a Hebrew Bible, becomes super influential. And yeah, he used Tiberian Masoretic traditions, but not directly from the Aleppo Codex.
Yaakov Ben Chaim would be influential in his own right. He didn't have access to the Aleppo Codex at that time. His was really the best copy that Europe had available to them, and so it became a standard throughout Europe.
So even though the Aleppo Codex was, top tier, there were other options out there.
Totally. And this is all happening during the Reformation, big religious shakeup. So having a printed Hebrew Bible, even if it wasn't from, the source, that was a huge deal.
It's crazy how one little decision could change things, huh?
Well, the story of the Ben Chaim text and how it influenced Europe is probably a great topic for another day.
But here's the irony. This whole idea that there's one perfect Bible, like it came straight from above, that's not really a Jewish idea.
You mean like the whole Textus Receptus thing, the accepted text set in stone?
Yeah. Both Jewish and Christian scholars, they got caught up in that, wanting a fixed, unchanging Bible. And it's got a much more interesting story to tell.
Before the printing press, the idea of 2 identical copies of any work of substantial length was just not realistic. Every text had slight variations.
It really is not just how they kept the text safe, but how they argued about it. It's got this whole history and real people involved.
And that's the cool part. When we read these ancient texts, we're not just reading. We're joining this conversation, this whole legacy of scholarship.
Yeah.
And yeah, even a little mystery never hurts. That's pretty incredible when you think about it.
Yeah.
So this codex, tell me a little about its history, its travels, because it's been all over the place, right?
And it has.
Crafted in Tiberias. It makes its way to Jerusalem,
Okay.
then to Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
and then it finally ends up in Aleppo, which is where it actually gets its name.
Wow.
It's just incredible, how much ground this codex covered.
It's true. And what's fascinating is that each of those stops, Tiberias, Jerusalem, Egypt, they're all key locations in Jewish history. Tiberias, known for its Jewish scholarship, Jerusalem, the spiritual heart, and then Egypt, where those Jewish communities really flourished. The codex saw it all.
Oh, yeah. It's been stolen by kings.
No way.
Ransomed by communities. Hidden away, lost, rediscovered.
Wow.
It's incredible.
Stolen by kings, like seriously.
Oh, yeah. Back then, books, especially religious texts, they were incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I guess so.
Not just for their content, but as symbols of power, legitimacy.
So who are we talking about here? What kings stole it?
Well, we know it was in Jerusalem originally, right?
Right.
And then it ends up in Cairo.
Great. What happened to it? You mentioned kings and ransom.
It wasn't just one ransom either. This book, it was basically a treasure magnet. Over the centuries, it was stolen and ransomed multiple times.
You're kidding. Multiple times.
Oh, yeah. I told you, this thing's got a history. One crazy story even involves the Crusaders way back in the 12th century. They saw the codex, knew what it was worth, and boom, held it captive in Cairo till they got a hefty ransom, likely taken during the Crusades.
Oh, wow.
And then, get this, it was held for ransom by the Seljuk Turks.
How much is that even worth? How do you even put a price on that?
The exact amount is lost to history.
I bet it was a lot.
But the Jewish community, they were eventually able to buy it back.
Wow, that says something right there, that they were willing to,
They understood its value.
pay whatever it took to get it back.
Exactly. It was that important to them.
So how did it get to Aleppo then?
Well, it's believed to have arrived there sometime in the late 15th century. In Aleppo at that time, it was a really interesting place.
Yeah.
Known for its diversity, its intellectualism,
Oh, wow.
particularly within the Jewish community there.
So, it found a good home.
It did.
Yeah.
It really did. They understood what they had. They built a special synagogue, the Mustariba Synagogue, specifically to house and protect the Codex, right?
They took it seriously.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So it was safe there, right? For a while, at least.
A silent witness to history. But then things take a turn. 1947, the UN votes to partition Palestine, and the effects were felt all the way over in Aleppo.
The UN decision to create the nation of Israel was one of the most divisive things to happen in the Middle East, well, ever.
It was a dark time. The anti-Jewish riots in Aleppo were devastating. Imagine the synagogue where they kept the Codex was completely ransacked. Nobody knew what happened to the Codex. There were whispers of its destruction.
I can only imagine the fear, chaos.
It was.
And in the aftermath, this huge question mark hanging over the Aleppo Codex. Some said they saw it burn. Others thought parts were stolen or hidden.
Right. There were so many conflicting accounts.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1957, when all hope seemed lost, a big chunk of the Codex reappears. Can you believe it? Smuggled out of Syria.
I read that they had a chance, the community, they had a chance to send it somewhere safe, before
things got bad.
Before it happened.
Well, it was even requested that they could photograph it so that we could have a copy to use for a critical edition of the Hebrew Bible called Biblia Hebraica, but they refused and didn't allow it.
Yeah.
It's easy to judge in hindsight.
They thought they could protect it.
They did. They believed Aleppo was its home, and they could keep it safe.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. It really is. And for a while, it seemed like 1,000 years of history had simply vanished.
And this is the crazy part. This is like something out of a movie.
Call me.
The Aleppo Codex. It didn't actually disappear.
Here's where the story takes a wild turn. Turns out, amidst all the chaos, some brave souls, they risked everything to save the Codex.
No way. How did they even manage to pull that off?
It was a whole secret operation. The details are still kind of hush-hush, protect the innocent and all that. But some say it was smuggled out piece by piece, hidden in secret compartments, passed from person to person.
It's hard to even fathom. Well, there's one lead that always piqued people's interest, a man named Yaakov Shemosh. He might have had closer ties to the Aleppo Codex than anyone realized.
Yaakov Shemosh.
Yeah.
Who was he?
He was a pillar of the Aleppo Jewish community. He was a shochet, that's a trained butcher. He was also considered a chocham, a wise man, a scholar.
So not just a scholar, but a real leader.
Exactly. He commanded immense respect. And then in the 1930s, things got even more intense. He moved to Turkey, and it was there he became instrumental in helping Syrian Jews escape to Israel.
Wow. Risking his life to help others.
Absolutely. Using his connections, his knowledge, He guided so many families to safety.
So we have this incredibly brave, respected figure, and somehow he's tied to the missing Aleppo Codex pages.
How? Okay, so remember Mordechai Fam, the man who smuggled the surviving codex to Israel.
Yeah, the daring escape.
Right. Well, listen to this. Fam's journey took him through Iskenderun, a Turkish port city. Guess who was living there?
Shamash.
Shamash. And get this, multiple sources say Fam actually stayed with Shamash during that time.
Okay, that can't be a coincidence.
Yeah.
The man smuggling out part of the codex stays with the man rumored to have the missing pages.
Right. And it gets even more interesting. Shamash was the first person to contact Israel about the codex arriving.
Oh, wow. So he was more than just a casual contact. He was directly involved.
Exactly. Which leads to the big question. Did any of those missing pages end up in Yaakov Shamosh's possession during that meeting?
I mean, it's certainly possible.
Right. Maybe Fatim, grateful for Shamosh's help, decided to entrust him with a few pages.
Or maybe Shamash felt it was his duty to safeguard some of them, especially with all the uncertainty at the time. He was already dedicated to protecting his community and their history.
You're right, it wouldn't be out of character for him, but, and this is important, we have to acknowledge that a lot of this is speculation. We're working with limited information.
Whispers and rumors.
Yeah. But still, the possibility of uncovering a hidden chapter in the Aleppo Codex story, it's just too intriguing to ignore.
It really is. So what happened to those pages? Did they stay with Shamosh's family?
Sadly, the trail runs cold there. A daring operation, that's for sure. It felt like a miracle, a sign that at least some of the codex had survived. But there was a problem. About 196 pages were still missing. Gone.
Wait, 196 pages? Out of how many total?
490. So yeah, we're missing a significant chunk, especially from the Torah.
Entire books,
Right.
like Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers gone.
Poof.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, wow. And we have no idea what happened to those missing pages. Were they deliberately removed?
yeah. There are theories. Some believe parts were stolen in the riot. Others think they might be hidden away, maybe by families who were too afraid to reveal they had them.
Oh, like they were trying to protect them.
Exactly. And then there's always the possibility of fire damage, although the pages that did survive are in remarkably good condition. That's some Indiana Jones stuff right there.
It really is. To risk so much, knowing the weight of what they were carrying, it's a testament to the power of this book and what it represents.
What happened during those missing years? I mean, did those pages get burned in the riots? Were they stolen somewhere along the way?
Right. Yeah, it's a question that has like haunted scholars for decades, you know.
Yeah.
So like let's actually like dig into those two main theories, starting with this idea that like maybe these pages were destroyed in those 1947 riots.
All right, so like picture it. Aleppo's in chaos, the synagogue is burning,
Right.
and in all the confusion, like parts of the codex are either lost or destroyed.
Yeah.
So is that kind of like what the evidence points to?
Well, there are firsthand accounts from like right after those riots happened that do mention missing pages.
Okay.
So it's not like people only noticed this like decades later.
Right.
The loss was, recorded pretty early on.
So it's not like a smoking gun or anything,
Right.
but it's like a clue at least, right?
Yeah, for sure.
What about that account from Rabbi Shigabar? You had mentioned that he actually saw the codex in Aleppo after the riots.
Yeah, so in 1952, so that's 5 years after the riots actually happened,
Okay.
Rabbi Shehibar saw the codex, like firsthand. And his written account actually mentions that, quote, nearly 1/4 was missing.
Wow.
Which, is a significant chunk.
So that's a pretty, like, strong piece of evidence in favor of that theory.
It seems like it.
But then we have, like, investigative journalist Maddie Friedman, right?
Oh, yeah.
Coming in with, like, a counter-argument.
Right.
He believes that those pages were stolen sometime after the codex actually reached Israel.
Yeah, interesting.
So, like, what's the basis for that theory?
So his argument kind of hinges on, like, the sheer volume of what's missing.
Yeah.
Like, we're not talking about, like, a few verses here and there.
Yeah.
Like, entire books of the Bible are gone, which is
Right.
a lot. And, like, his point is, like, wouldn't someone have noticed that before it was moved to Israel?
Yeah, it's like you were saying before.
Right.
This was the crown. Like, you can't just, like, misplace a couple hundred pages
Yeah.
of something that important and have no one bat an eye.
Exactly. And, like, Friedman actually points to a few things that I think kind of muddy the waters here.
Okay.
First, there are, like, conflicting accounts about the codex's condition after the riots.
Mm-hmm.
Like, some accounts say it was super damaged.
Yeah.
Others say it seemed relatively, like, unharmed.
Sure.
So it's like, which is it?
Right.
And then there's this whole thing about a missing document. So apparently there was a list made of the Codex's contents before it even left Aleppo.
Okay.
But that list has, like, vanished.
Ooh, so it's like a missing document within a missing document mystery. I mean, if that list existed and it showed that pages were already missing back in Aleppo, that would, like, really challenge Friedman's theory.
Totally. But without that list, we're kind of left with, like, way more questions than answers.
Right.
Which, like, I guess leads to a bigger question here.
Okay.
Like, if you were trying to solve this case, like, what kind of evidence would actually convince you that these pages were stolen and not destroyed?
That's a great question.
Right.
I mean, like, a signed confession from the thief would be nice, but I'm guessing that's not really an option at this point.
Would it be, like, physical evidence? Like, imagine if we found, like, a fragment of one of these missing pages.
Right.
But it had evidence that it was, like, torn out, not burned.
Yeah.
That, like, hinted at a theft.
Ooh, that would be cool.
Right.
Or what about, like, a rock-solid alibi for the riot?
That's interesting.
Like, what if we could definitively prove that the Codex was totally intact after the riots, but before it left for Israel?
Now, those would be game changers. It's these kinds of, like, missing pieces that make this case so fascinating.
Yeah.
And honestly, kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
Even to this day.
But, okay, so let's just say, like, for argument's sake, that this whole, like, theft theory is correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would even be the motive for that? It's not like you can just, like, walk into a pawn shop and sell, like, a few chapters of Genesis or something.
Right, exactly. Like, this is not really about the monetary value, at least, like, not in the traditional sense, you know?
Yeah.
The real question is, like, what would possess someone to steal pages from a text that's been, like, revered for centuries?
That's a great question. Yeah, like, it's got to be more than just wanting, like, some kind of unique collector's item.
Right, exactly. Like, we're talking about a document that's not just, like, old, but, like, sacred to, you know, millions of people.
Right.
So there are, like, all these layers of, like, religious and historical significance that are at play here.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if someone believed that they were, like, the rightful owner of those pages, you know?
Oh, wow.
Exactly. And, like, the motives could be, like, super complex, right? Like, maybe it was a desire to, like, protect the pages.
Right.
Or to control them. Or maybe even to, like, completely rewrite the narrative, you know? And it's, like, a really...
It's kind of a dark thought.
It is kind of a dark thought. But, like, unfortunately, the theft of these historical documents, even, like, sacred ones, it's not, like, totally unheard of.
Right. So where is it now?
The Aleppo Codex is currently in Israel, at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem.
Wow.
And while it's not completely intact, sadly, about a quarter of it was lost during those chaotic times. But what remains is still incredibly valuable.
It's why the discovery of that one fragment back in 2007 caused such a stir.
2007, that recently. What fragment?
Just a small fragment from the Book of Exodus, but it had been kept safe by a family in New York. They had no idea what they had.
Wow. That's incredible. Hidden in plain sight all those years. So much of this is shrouded in mystery. Where do we even begin to look for the rest of the missing pages? Makes you wonder, could we ever find them? Those missing pages? Or is that just wishful thinking?
It's hard to say, but that fragment from Exodus that turned up in 2007, that gives me hope.
That's true. Who knows what else is still out there just waiting to be discovered? Maybe someone listening right now has a piece of the puzzle and doesn't even know it.
Well, I think that about wraps up our discussion of the Aleppo Codex. Thank you, Ruth and Boaz, for your discussion on this topic.
It's a story about scholarship, about faith, about the power of knowledge. It's like holding a piece of history in your hands. And it makes you think, what other secrets are out there just waiting to be discovered?
Right. It's incredible. And it really makes you appreciate the dedication of everyone who ensured its survival.
It does. And to everyone listening, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you say is, like, the main takeaway?
Well, I think this case, as much as it is about these, like, physically missing pages, it also just shows how incredibly important the Aleppo Codex is, even in its, like, you know, fragmented form.
It's really a cornerstone of the Hebrew Bible. Yeah, and then there's that whole other question of, like, ownership.
Oh, right.
Which is, like, a whole other debate in itself. Like, does this codex belong to a specific nation?
Mm-hmm.
Does it belong to a particular religious community?
Right.
Or is it, like, part of this, like, much larger human heritage?
Right.
These are really, like, tough questions.
Yeah.
And there are like no easy answers.
No. What do you think? What knowledge, what stories, what traditions do you think are worth saving? Let us know.
If you found this topic interesting, please like and subscribe and join us on Discord for more conversation on the matter. You'll find a link in the description.